The first time Luca DeLuca spoke Claire Evans's name, he was standing in a room he was never supposed to know was being watched. Rain pressed against the reinforced windows of the FBI's Chicago field office, turning the city beyond the glass into a blurred kingdom of silver lights and black towers. At 2:17 inches the morning, the organized crime division had gone almost silent. Most of the agents had left hours ago. The only sounds were the low hum of servers, the occasional click of a keyboard, and the faint static breathing through Claire's headphones. She sat alone beneath the blue glow of 6 monitors, translating an intercepted meeting between senior members of the DeLuca organization. The surveillance feed showed the private library of a lakeside estate north of Chicago. Dark wood, marble fireplace, floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting a storm-black sky. 5 men stood around a table scattered with shipping manifests and photographs. At the center of them was Luca DeLuca. He wore a charcoal suit without a tie, the collar of his white shirt open at the throat. 38 years old. Tall, broad-shouldered, perfectly still. He had the controlled presence of a man who did not need to raise his voice, because everyone around him already knew what happened when he was disobeyed. Claire had translated hundreds of hours of his conversations. She knew the texture of his silence. She knew the slight change in his breathing when he was angry. She knew he used formal Italian when issuing threats, and his father's Sicilian dialect only when speaking about loyalty, blood, or death. She knew that 3 federal task forces had tried to convict him. She knew that none had succeeded. She also knew she had never met him. On the screen, one of Luca's men pushed a photograph across the table. "The shipment is compromised," the man said in Italian. "Someone inside the Port Authority gave the route to the Albanians." Claire translated softly into the recording system. "The shipment has been compromised. An internal source provided the route to the Albanian organization." Luca did not look at the photograph. "Then the shipment was never ours," he replied. Claire's fingers moved across the keyboard. "Then the shipment was never ours." The other men exchanged uneasy glances. Luca turned toward the fireplace. For 3 seconds, he said nothing. Then his eyes lifted. Not toward his men. Not toward the windows. Toward the hidden camera. Claire stopped typing. The surveillance device had been embedded inside a decorative brass clock on a shelf behind the table. According to the technical unit, it was undetectable without specialized equipment. Luca looked directly into its lens. The room around Claire seemed to contract. His expression did not change. His face remained calm, almost unreadable, but something in his eyes sharpened with intimate certainty. He stepped closer to the camera. One of his men asked, "Luca?" He raised one hand. The room fell silent. Claire's heartbeat became so loud she could hear it beneath the static. Luca stared through the lens as though he could see beyond it, through miles of darkness and encrypted federal systems, directly into the surveillance room. When he spoke, he used English. "Claire Evan." Her hands froze above the keyboard. A current of cold moved down her spine. No one in the room on the screen reacted. They did not understand why he had spoken the name. Luca came closer. His face filled the monitor. Claire could see the shadow of exhaustion beneath his eyes, the faint scar near his right temple, the controlled tension in his jaw. His voice dropped into something meant for one person alone. "Come home." Claire tore off the headphones. The chair rolled backward and struck the desk behind her. For one suspended moment, the screens continued playing without sound. Luca remained there, looking straight at her from a room 30 miles away. Then, every monitor went black. The surveillance feed vanished. The overhead lights flickered once. Claire stared at her own reflection in the dead screen. Someone behind her said, "Don't move." She turned. Special Agent Daniel Cross stood in the doorway with his weapon drawn. He was her supervisor and one of the few people in the bureau she trusted. 41, composed, relentlessly practical, Daniel had recruited her from a federal language program 6 years earlier. He had been the first person to tell her that her ability to hear emotional patterns inside dialects was more valuable than any academic credential. Now his gun was aimed past her toward the dark monitors. "What happened?" he asked. Claire could barely force the words out. "He said my name." Daniel's gaze shifted to her. "Who?" She looked at the black screen. "Luca DeLuca." Within 6 minutes, the surveillance floor was sealed. Within 10, Deputy Director Warren Hale arrived. Hale was 60, silver-haired, elegant, and known throughout the Bureau as the man who had dismantled 2 of the largest organized crime networks in the Midwest. He had a calm, paternal manner that made younger agents straighten when he entered a room. He had approved Claire's security clearance. He sent her a birthday card every year. He listened while technicians attempted to restore the feed. Claire sat at the conference table with a paper cup of water she had not touched. "Repeat exactly what he said," Hale instructed. She did. Hale's face revealed nothing. Daniel stood beside the glass wall, arms folded. There was no way DeLuca could know who was translating the feed. "No legitimate way," Hale said. Claire looked from one man to the other. "My identity is protected inside the division." "It was," Daniel replied. The use of the past tense tightened something in her chest. Hale sat across from her. "Claire, think carefully. Have you ever had contact with DeLuca outside this office?" "No." "Seen him in person?" "No." "Received unusual calls, letters, packages?" "No." "Has anyone approached you using your childhood name?" She frowned. "My childhood name?" Hale paused for less than a second. It was almost nothing, but Claire had spent her career listening for hesitation. "What childhood name?" she asked. Hale leaned back. "I meant any nickname or former surname. My surname has always been Evans." Daniel's attention moved toward Hale. Hale offered a reassuring smile that did not reach his eyes. Of course, Claire felt a new kind of fear enter the room, not the sharp fear she had felt when Luca spoke her name. This was quieter, colder, the fear of realizing the people around her might know something about her life that she did not. Hale ordered her removed from active duty and assigned 2 agents to escort her home. "Until we understand the breach," he said, "you are not to access any case files, contact anyone from the DeLuca investigation, or leave your apartment without protection." Claire stood. "Am I being protected or contained?" Hale's expression softened. "That depends on what Luca DeLuca wants from you." The rain had turned violent by the time Claire reached her apartment building in Lincoln Park. 2 unmarked sedans waited across the street. Agents walked her to the lobby, checked the elevator, inspected every room, and assured her the building would remain under observation. When they finally left her alone, Claire locked the door and stood in the silence of her apartment. Everything looked ordinary. Her books lined the walls. A half-finished cup of tea sat beside the couch. Her blue coat hung near the door. On the kitchen counter, a framed photograph showed Claire at 12 years old, between her adoptive parents, Margaret and Thomas Evans. During a summer trip to Lake Michigan, she crossed the room and picked it up. Her parents had died 5 years earlier, in what police described as a highway collision caused by icy roads. Claire had grieved them with the clean certainty of a daughter who knew she had been loved. They had told her she was adopted as an infant. They had told her her birth parents had died overseas. They had never mentioned another surname. She examined the photograph as though hidden answers might emerge from the familiar faces. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Claire stared at it until the call stopped. A message appeared. "You should not have gone home alone." Her breath caught. She immediately called Daniel. Before he answered, another message arrived. "The men outside do not work for you." Claire moved toward the window. Across the street, the 2 federal sedans remained beneath the rain. One agent sat behind the wheel of each vehicle. Daniel answered. "Claire, did you assign 2 cars to my building?" "Yes." "Who were the agents?" "Reynolds and Shaw." Claire looked down. The man in the first car stepped out. He was not Agent Reynolds. She knew Reynolds. He had a broken nose and walked with a slight limp from an old injury. This man was taller and moved without hesitation. He looked directly up at her window. Daniel's voice sharpened. "Claire, get away from the glass." The apartment lights went out. Claire dropped to the floor. The building alarm began to scream. Someone struck her front door hard enough to bend the frame. Daniel shouted through the phone, "Go to the service stairs. Now." Claire crawled through the darkness, grabbed the emergency flashlight from a kitchen drawer, and reached the hallway just as the front lock splintered. She ran. The service stairs were at the end of the corridor. She pushed through the metal door and descended, one hand sliding over the rail. Heavy footsteps entered her apartment above. "Claire," Daniel said, "real agents are 6 minutes away. I don't have 6 minutes." She reached the 4th floor. The stairwell door opened below her. A man appeared, blocking the descent. Claire stopped. He wore black tactical clothing without insignia. He raised a suppressed pistol. Before he could fire, the stairwell window exploded inward. Glass burst across the concrete. A dark figure came through the opening from the fire escape, seized the gunman's wrist, and drove him into the wall with brutal precision. The weapon discharged once into the ceiling. Claire stumbled backward. The attacker fell unconscious at the stranger's feet. Then the stranger turned. Luca DeLuca stood between Claire and the broken window, rain streaming from his dark hair and black overcoat. He looked exactly as he did on the surveillance footage, but the screen had failed to capture the full force of him. In person, his stillness felt more dangerous. His attention settled on her with an intensity that made the narrow stairwell seem smaller. Claire pressed herself against the wall. "You." Luca's gaze moved over her face, as if verifying something he had waited years to see. "There you are," he said. A second gunman entered from above. Luca moved before Claire heard the door open. He caught her around the waist and pulled her against him as bullets struck the concrete where she had been standing. Claire felt the hard line of his body shielding hers. He fired twice over her shoulder. The attacker fell. The gunshots left a ringing silence. Luca's arm remained around her. For one breath, neither of them moved. Claire could feel his heartbeat beneath his coat. Slow, controlled, nothing like her own. His hand was spread against the curve of her waist, firm but careful. The contact was intimate enough to shock her. She pushed away. "Don't touch me." His hand dropped immediately. Something flickered across his face. Not anger, restraint. He looked down the stairs. "More are coming. I'm not going anywhere with you. You can stay and explain your position to the men who just tried to kill you. You might have sent them. If I wanted you dead, Claire, you would not have heard me say your name." Sirens rose in the distance. Luca reached inside his coat. Claire tensed. He withdrew a small silver pendant, a crescent moon surrounding a single blue stone. The world tilted. Claire had seen that pendant before. Not in reality. In dreams. Fragmented childhood dreams she had dismissed for years, a woman singing in Italian, a house filled with sunlight, a man lifting her onto his shoulders, the cold touch of a silver moon against her skin. Luca held it between them. "This belonged to your mother." Claire stared at him. "My mother died before I could remember her." "No," Luca said. "She died because people wanted to make sure you never remembered her." The stairwell door below opened. Luca seized Claire's hand. "Choose quickly." She hated that her body trusted the urgency in his voice. She hated even more that she no longer trusted the sirens outside. He led her through the shattered window onto the fire escape. Rain struck her face as they descended toward the alley. A black SUV waited with its rear door open. 2 armed men covered the entrance. Claire pulled back. "I am an FBI employee. Do you understand what happens if I get into that vehicle?" Luca looked at her through the rain. "Yes." "What?" "You survived long enough to learn why the FBI gave you to me." The next burst of gunfire came from the rooftop across the alley. Luca pushed Claire behind the SUV and covered her body with his as bullets shattered the rear window. His men returned fire. Claire looked up at him. Rain moved over the sharp planes of his face. His jaw was clenched, his attention fixed on every potential threat around her. A bullet tore through the shoulder of his coat. He did not flinch. "Get inside," he ordered. Claire saw blood darkening the fabric. He had been shot, protecting her. Again, she climbed into the SUV. Luca entered behind her, slammed the door, and the vehicle surged into the rain. Chicago blurred beyond the armored windows. Claire sat as far from him as the seat allowed. His men drove without speaking. Luca removed his coat. The bullet had grazed his upper arm, leaving a torn line through his shirt. "You're bleeding," Claire said despite herself. "It is not serious. You were hit. I have been hit before. That is not comforting. It was not intended to be." He opened a medical kit and attempted to clean the wound with one hand. Claire watched him struggle for several seconds. Then she snatched the gauze from him. "This does not mean I trust you. I would be disappointed if it did." She pressed the cloth against his arm harder than necessary. His eyes remained on her face. "Why did you say my name?" she asked. "To make them move." "Who?" "The people who have been hiding you. You exposed me deliberately. I forced them to reveal themselves. They tried to kill me. And now you understand that your danger did not begin with me." Claire's anger sharpened. "You used me as bait." A muscle moved in his jaw. "Yes." The admission stunned her more than denial would have. "At least you're honest. Only when honesty does not put you in greater danger." She tied the bandage. "Where are you taking me?" "To a safe location. Your definition of safe is probably different from mine. My definition is any place where Warren Hale cannot reach you." Claire went still. "You know Deputy Director Hale. I know what he is. He has spent 20 years prosecuting organized crime. He has spent 20 years deciding which criminals survive." The SUV turned into an underground entrance beneath a luxury hotel on the Chicago River. Steel doors closed behind them. Luca led Claire through a private elevator into a penthouse that seemed suspended above the storm. Glass walls revealed the river and city lights below. Black marble, warm wood, restrained luxury. There were no photographs, no personal objects. Nothing that suggested anyone truly lived there. Armed men secured the perimeter. A woman in her 50s approached Claire with folded clothes and a towel. "My name is Sophia," she said gently. "You are safe here." Claire looked at Luca. "Everyone keeps telling me that while carrying guns." Sophia almost smiled. Luca did not. "Prepare the East Suite," he told her. "I'm not sleeping here," Claire said. "You are not leaving?" That sounded like a threat. It was a logistical fact. Claire stepped closer to him. "You do not get to kidnap me and call it protection." His eyes lowered briefly to the distance between them. "You entered the vehicle voluntarily, while being shot at. Your judgment improves under pressure." She wanted to slap him. The fact that he seemed to know it made her angrier. "Tell me who I am," she demanded. The room changed. Luca's men looked away. Sophia stopped near the hall. Luca's expression became colder. Not because he felt nothing, Claire realized, but because he was containing too much. "Your name at birth was Chiara Moretti," he said. Claire stared at him. "No. Your father was Matteo Moretti. Your mother was Elena Bellini." "No. Matteo was an accountant for 3 Chicago families. He discovered that federal agents were laundering confiscated mafia assets through private intelligence contractors." Claire backed away. "My parents were Thomas and Margaret Evans. They were the people who raised you." "They were my parents." "Yes," Luca said quietly. "They were." His agreement stripped the fight from her for half a second. He continued. "Matteo agreed to testify. Before he could, his safe house was attacked. Your mother was killed. Your father escaped with you. Claire's hand closed around the silver pendant. What happened to him? He gave you to Thomas and Margaret Evans because they were part of a witness relocation team he trusted. They changed your identity and disappeared. And my father, Luca's silence answered before he spoke. He was murdered 3 days later. Claire turned toward the windows. The city below looked distant and unreal. She had translated death threats, confessions, coded orders. She had listened to men speak about murder with the boredom of discussing weather. None of that had prepared her to hear her own life reduced to a sequence of hidden deaths. You expect me to believe my adoptive parents lied to me for 30 years? They loved you enough to lie. You don't know what they felt. I met them. Claire turned. When? 6 years ago. The floor seemed to shift beneath her. Before they died. Yes. What did they tell you? That you were not ready. For what? For me? The answer entered the space between them like a blade. Claire studied him. You said my father entrusted you with something. You would have been a child. I was 12. How did a 12-year-old mafia heir become part of my father's plan? Luca walked to a cabinet and removed an old leather-bound notebook. He placed it on the table. The pages were filled with columns of numbers, dates, and handwritten Italian. Claire recognized the structure immediately. A cipher ledger. My father was killed when I was 12. Luca said, Your father found me hiding beneath the floor of a warehouse after the attack. He could have left me there. Instead, he carried me out. Claire opened the notebook. Inside the cover was a photograph. A younger Matteo Moretti stood beside a dark-haired boy with solemn eyes. The boy was unmistakably Luca. Matteo held a little girl in his arms. She was perhaps 2 years old, round-cheeked, smiling, wearing the silver moon pendant. Claire's breath disappeared. Luca's voice lowered. Your father saved my life. Months later, when he knew he was being hunted, he came to me. He gave me that photograph and made me promise that if he failed, I would find you one day. Claire looked at the child in the picture. What exactly did you promise? To protect you. That doesn't explain, come home. Lukas Hase held hers. Your family estate still exists. Your father's evidence is hidden there. The trust created in your birth name owns properties, companies, and records Hale has spent decades trying to find. So this is about evidence. It began that way. The words were too carefully chosen. Claire heard what he had not said. What did it become? Luca looked away first. That frightened her more than his stare. For the next 2 days, Claire remained inside the penthouse. Luca gave her access to documents, photographs, and encrypted files proving that Chiara Moretti had existed. She examined birth records, hospital documents, relocation forms, and her father's handwritten testimony. Every piece could have been fabricated. Together, they were overwhelming. Daniel called 17 times. Claire did not answer until the 3rd evening. She stood in Luca's study, while rain moved across the windows. Luca was across the room, speaking quietly with his security chief, Marco Santini. Claire answered on speaker. Daniel. His breath came through the line. Thank God. Where are you? I'm safe. With DeLuca? Yes. Claire. Listen to me. Hale has classified you as abducted. Every federal and local unit is looking for you. 2 men disguised as federal agents tried to kill me. We know. DeLuca's people killed them before we could identify them. They were working for Hale. Silence. Then Daniel said, You don't know that. He knows about my birth identity. Another pause. Claire closed her eyes. You knew, she whispered. Claire, you knew there was another identity. I knew there were sealed witness protection records. I did not know the full history. Why didn't you tell me? Because Hale said disclosure would put you in danger. Luca watched her from across the room. His expression remained still, but Claire saw the tension in his hands. Daniel continued. DeLuca is manipulating you. He built this operation to make himself look like your rescuer. Claire glanced at Luca. That is possible. Luca did not object. But Hale lied to me. She said, "Come back, and we will investigate him. Back to the building where my security was compromised. I can protect you." Luca's gaze hardened. Claire asked, "Did you know Hale recruited me because of my connection to this case?" Daniel took too long to answer. Her chest tightened. "Daniel, I knew your language profile matched the DeLuca investigation. That is not what I asked." "No," he said finally. "I did not know your entire career had been engineered." Claire gripped the phone. "What does that mean?" "Hale personally ordered your recruitment. He rejected 3 translators with more field experience. He made sure you were assigned to every DeLuca interception." Luca dismissed Marco with a glance and approached. Daniel's voice became urgent. "Claire, I found something else. The surveillance warrant for the Lakeside estate was based on an informant who does not exist. The entire operation was constructed. The twist landed with physical force." Claire looked at Luca. He showed no surprise. "You knew," she said. "Yes." Daniel heard him. "Claire, get away from him." She ignored the warning. "Why would Hale create an investigation to put me in front of you?" Luca's eyes remained on hers. "Because he believed I would lead you to your father's evidence." "And did you?" "I am about to." The line went dead. Claire lowered the phone. Luca had disconnected it remotely. "You had no right. Daniel's location was being traced. You cannot keep deciding what information I'm allowed to hear." "I can when the cost is your life. That is not protection. That is control." His expression changed almost imperceptibly. "You think I do not know the difference? I think men like you stop seeing the difference when they become afraid." The word struck somewhere deeper than she intended. Luca moved closer. "You believe I am afraid? I think you are terrified." His eyes narrowed. "Of Hale, of losing control of the situation." He stood so near that Claire could feel the heat of him. "And what do you imagine I cannot control?" "Me." Silence stretched between them. He lifted one hand. For a moment, she thought he would touch her face. His fingers stopped a breath from her cheek. Claire's pulse quickened. Luca looked at the space between his hand and her skin, as though that final inch required more discipline than any act of violence. Then he lowered his hand. "You are the one thing I have never intended to control," he said. "Yet you manipulated an FBI investigation. I manipulated Hale's manipulation. That is not better." "No," Luca replied. "It is simply true." That night, Claire found the room. She had been unable to sleep, so she walked through the penthouse searching for the kitchen. A security door at the end of the west corridor stood slightly open. Inside was a surveillance archive. Dozens of monitors covered one wall. Some showed live feeds from the building. Others displayed paused images. Claire stepped closer. Her own face stared back at her. Photographs filled the screens. Claire leaving the FBI office. Claire buying coffee. Claire reading beside the window of a bookstore. Claire laughing with her mother 6 years earlier. Claire standing alone at her parents' funeral. Claire froze. There were hundreds. Different years, different seasons, different distances. Her stomach turned. On a central table lay physical files, each marked with dates. She opened the nearest one. Inside were reports on her apartment, work assignments, medical emergencies, travel, friendships, even the names of men she had dated. Luca appeared in the doorway. He stopped when he saw the file in her hands. Claire looked at him. The betrayal was so complete that anger came slowly. "You watched me?" "Yes." "For how long?" 6 years directly. Longer through intermediaries. "You followed me to my parents' funeral. I was there. I would have seen you. I made sure you did not." She threw the file onto the table. "You collected photographs of me to confirm you were safe. There are pictures of me inside restaurants, at home, walking alone, I never placed cameras inside your apartment. Is that supposed to comfort me? No. His honesty enraged her. You studied the people I dated. They were investigated. Why? To ensure none had been sent by Hale. And when you discovered they were ordinary men? Luca's jaw tightened. Claire heard the answer in his silence. You still watched? Yes. Why? He looked at her with the same unbearable restraint he had shown from the beginning. Because stopping became impossible. The room seemed to lose oxygen. Claire stepped back. That is not romantic. I did not say it was. It is obsessive. Yes. Dangerous. Yes. Wrong. His voice dropped. Yes. She expected him to defend himself. He did not. That made it worse. Claire looked at the photograph of herself at 27, standing in the rain outside the cemetery while her parents were buried. Were you there when they died? I arrived at the hospital 11 minutes after Margaret was pronounced dead. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. Did they know you were watching me? Yes. They allowed it? They asked me to continue. Claire shook her head. No. They would never have wanted this. Luca approached slowly. Your father's enemies found them 2 weeks before the crash. Margaret called me. She believed their house was being watched. The police said the accident was caused by ice. The brake line was cut. The room blurred. Claire reached for the table. Luca moved instinctively, one hand closing around her arm. She pulled away. He released her immediately. They were murdered? She whispered. Yes. And you never told me. I had no proof Hale would not kill you the moment you knew. You decided ignorance was safer. I decided you breathing was more important than you forgiving me. Claire stared at him through tears. You don't get to make that choice for me. No, he said, but I made it anyway. She struck him. The sound cracked through the surveillance room. Luca's head turned slightly with the force of it. No one entered. No guard reacted. He looked back at her. There was no anger in his face. Only pain he refused to reveal fully. Claire's palm burned. I hate you, she said. I know. I don't trust you. You should not. I want to leave. His silence lasted too long. Claire's voice hardened. You said you wouldn't control me. Luca reached into his pocket and placed a keycard on the table. The private elevator will take you to the garage. A car will bring you anywhere you choose. She looked at the card. You're letting me go? If I keep you here against your will, Hale wins before we reach him. Would you follow me? Yes. The answer was immediate. Claire gave a humorless laugh. At least you remain consistent. She took the keycard and walked past him. He did not stop her. The elevator descended toward the garage. Claire stood alone, shaking with anger and grief. When the doors opened, a black sedan waited. The driver asked where she wanted to go. She almost said Daniel's apartment. Instead, she gave the address of the Catholic church her parents had attended. St. Michael's stood beneath the rain, like a dark stone ship. The sanctuary was empty, except for candles near the altar. Claire sat in the last pew. For nearly an hour, she tried to separate truth from manipulation. Luca had used her. Hale had shaped her career. Her parents had hidden her identity. Daniel had kept secrets. Every man in her life seemed to have decided that love or duty gave him the right to choose what she could survive. The church doors opened behind her. She did not turn. I told you he would follow, a voice said. Claire recognized Deputy Director Hale. She rose. Hale stood in the center aisle, wearing a dark overcoat. 4 armed agents entered behind him. Where is Daniel? She asked. Agent Cross made several unfortunate decisions. Fear pierced her. What did you do? He is alive. For now. Hale approached with the calm expression Claire had trusted for years. You have had a difficult 48 hours. You recruited me because of my father. I recruited you because you were useful. The bluntness of it chilled her. Did you kill my parents? They were warned not to interfere. Claire's fingers curled. You sent those men to my apartment. I sent them to retrieve you. DeLuca escalated the situation. They tried to shoot me. A regrettable misunderstanding. Hale stopped 3 pews away. Luca has shown you the ledger? Not yet. Then he still needs you. For what? To unlock your father's archive. Matteo designed the encryption around vocal recognition, language memory, and family-specific phrases. Luca can locate the vault, but only you can open it. Claire understood. The strange dreams, the Italian song, the phrases buried beneath conscious memory. Her father had hidden the key inside her childhood. Hale extended a hand. Come with me, Claire. You can end this without more bloodshed. You engineered the entire investigation. I created conditions. You placed me in front of Luca. I knew he would reveal himself if he believed you were threatened. And all those recordings, some were authentic. Others were staged by DeLuca. He has been speaking to you for months. Claire's pulse changed. What? Hale smiled faintly. You did not notice? The repeated references to moonlight. The old Sicilian lullabies. Shipping dates matching your birthday. He constructed messages inside criminal conversations because he knew you would be the one translating them. Every strange phrase Claire had dismissed returned at once. The moon returns to the northern window. The lost daughter hears what others cannot. Home waits beneath the bells. Luca had been speaking to her long before he said her name. Hale continued. He wanted to awaken your memory. I wanted him to lead us to the evidence. You were the bridge between us. Claire looked toward the altar. And now you bring Luca to the Moretti estate. What happens after the vault opens? We eliminate the evidence. And Luca? He will die resisting arrest. And me? Hale's silence was answer enough. Claire reached slowly into her coat pocket. Hale's agents raised their weapons. Careful. She withdrew the silver moon pendant. Hale's gaze fixed on it. Where did you get that? Luca gave it to me. For the first time, Warren Hale looked afraid. The pendant was not merely jewelry. It was part of the key. The church lights went out. Gunfire erupted from the balcony. Claire dropped behind a pew as stained glass shattered above her. Hale's agents returned fire. Black-clad men entered through the side doors. Luca walked down the center aisle through smoke and falling glass. He wore a black suit beneath a long coat, a weapon in one hand. His face was cold enough to stop breath. One of Hale's agents turned toward Claire. Luca shot him before the barrel aligned. Hale grabbed Claire from behind and pressed a gun beneath her jaw. Everything stopped. Luca stood 20 feet away. Blood marked his white shirt near the ribs, but his hand remained steady. Hale pulled Claire against him, dropped the weapon. Luca's eyes moved to Claire's face. The fury inside them was almost inhuman, yet his voice remained calm. Claire. She understood the question beneath her name. Are you hurt? She gave the smallest shake of her head. Hale pushed the gun harder against her skin. Drop it. Luca lowered his weapon to the stone floor. Hale smiled. Claire drove her heel down onto his foot and turned sharply. The gun discharged. Luca crossed the distance before the echo faded. He struck Hale's wrist, pulled Claire behind him, and drove the deputy director against a pillar. His hands closed around Hale's throat. The violence in him was no longer restrained. Hale clawed at his arms. Luca's voice was quiet. You killed her mother. He slammed Hale against the stone. You killed the people who raised her. Another impact. You put men inside her home. Hale's face darkened. Claire saw what Luca was about to do. Part of her wanted to let him. A darker part wanted to watch. But if Luca killed a deputy director inside a church, Hale's network would bury the truth beneath the act. Claire touched Luca's arm. Stop. He did not move. Luca. His grip tightened. Claire stepped beside him. Look at me. Slowly. His eyes found hers. The rage inside them was terrifying. So was the fear beneath it. He needs to answer for everything, she said. Not disappear as another body you left behind. Luca's breathing was heavy. For several seconds, she did not know whether he could release the violence. Then his hands opened. Hale collapsed onto the floor. Luca turned toward Claire. His gaze moved over her face, her throat, her shoulders, searching for injury. She saw blood spreading across his side. "You're shot. It is not serious. You always say that." His knees nearly gave way. Claire caught him. For the first time, the feared Mafia Boss allowed his weight to fall against her. She lowered him onto the church steps. His men secured Hale and the surviving agents. Claire pressed both hands against Luca's wound. "You followed me," she said. "Yes, I knew you would." "Yes, you could have been killed." His eyes held hers. "So could you. That does not make this reasonable." "No." Despite the blood, despite the broken glass and armed men surrounding them, something inside her fractured into a breathless, disbelieving laugh. Luca watched her. His hand rose slowly. This time, his fingers touched her cheek. The contact was so gentle it hurt more than force would have. "I heard you say you hated me," he murmured. "I did, pestinse." She looked at the blood on her hands. "Do not become optimistic while bleeding in a church." His thumb brushed beneath her eye. Claire, the way he said her name, was no longer a summons. It was a confession he did not know how to make. She leaned closer. "What?" "I cannot lose you." There it was. Not love. Not yet. Something more dangerous because it was spoken by a man who had built his entire life around never needing anyone. Claire closed her eyes for 1 second. "You do not own me. I know. You do not decide what I can survive. I know. You do not get to turn fear into control." His hand lowered. "I am trying to learn." It was the first promise she believed. Luca was treated in a private medical wing beneath one of his hotels. The bullet had passed through his side without striking major organs. He required stitches, blood, and strict rest, all of which he accepted with visible contempt. Claire stayed. She told herself it was because Hale had escaped federal custody during transport. That was partly true. She told herself it was because Daniel remained missing. That was also true. She did not admit that when Luca woke in the middle of the night, his first word was her name. 3 days later, they traveled to the Moretti estate. It stood on a stormy stretch of Lake Michigan, abandoned for nearly 30 years. The mansion had once belonged to Claire's grandfather. Hale's people had searched it repeatedly but found nothing. Claire arrived in a convoy of black SUVs beneath a sky heavy with snow. The house was enormous and decaying, its pale stone exterior covered in winter vines. Waves struck the cliffs below. When she stepped into the entrance hall, memory moved through her body before thought. A curved staircase, a broken chandelier, blue tiles shaped like stars. She knew the house. Not clearly, emotionally. She walked toward a corridor without being shown. Luca followed several steps behind. "You have been here before," he said. "I remember the floor. At the end of the corridor stood a locked nursery. The silver pendant opened the door. Inside, dust covered a small bed, shelves of children's books, and a wooden music box painted with moons. Claire touched it. A melody began, the same lullaby from her dreams. Words returned in Italian. She sang them softly. The final line translated to, "When the moon finds the water, the lost child finds the door." Luca looked toward the windows. Moonlight reflected on the lake below. A beam passed through the blue stone in Claire's pendant and struck a point on the nursery wall. Behind the plaster, they found a steel mechanism. The voice lock activated. Claire placed her palm against the panel. A recording of her father began. "Chiara, if you are hearing this, then I failed to give you an ordinary life." Claire stopped breathing. Matteo's voice was warm, tired, and filled with restrained grief. "I wanted you to grow up without knowing what men like me had done. But the truth has a way of returning to the people who inherit its cost." The panel requested a phrase. Claire did not know what to say. Then Luca spoke from behind her. "What did your father call you in the photograph?" Claire stared at the image in her mind. The little girl wearing the moon pendant. A voice from a dream whispered, "My brave little star." Claire repeated it in Italian. The vault opened. Inside were ledgers, recordings, photographs, bank documents, and federal case files proving that Warren Hale and a network of officials had spent decades laundering seized assets, selling witness identities, and arranging assassinations through criminal organizations. There was enough evidence to destroy careers, agencies, and families. There was also a final video. Matteo appeared on the screen. Beside him sat 12-year-old Luca. The boy's face was bruised. His eyes were already too old. Matteo placed a hand on his shoulder. "If my daughter reaches this room with you, then you kept your promise." Young Luca looked directly into the camera. "I will bring her home." Claire turned toward the adult man beside her. For the first time since she met him, Luca looked vulnerable, not weakened, exposed. "You built your life around a promise made when you were 12, she said. "I had nothing else worth building around. That is too much to put on one person. I know. Did you ever imagine who I might become? Every day?" "That isn't an answer." His gaze moved over her face. "I imagined you kind because your father was kind. I imagined you stubborn because your mother argued with armed men. I imagined you would hate me when you learned what I became. Did you imagine watching me from shadows for 6 years? No. What changed? You laughed outside a bookstore." Claire blinked. Luca's voice became quieter. "It was raining. You had bought more books than you could carry. The bottom of the bag tore, and everything fell onto the sidewalk. A stranger helped you collect them. You laughed." He looked toward the open vault. "I had spent years protecting an idea. In that moment, you became a woman I wanted to know. But you didn't approach me. I had blood on my hands. Hale was watching. Your parents were afraid. Every path toward you carried danger. So you stayed away. I tried. The photographs suggest you failed." "Yes." Claire stepped closer. "What were those messages in the recordings?" His expression tightened. "Fragments. Of what?" "Things I could not say to you directly." "Give me an example." He looked at her for a long moment. "The moon returns to the northern window." I translated that as a meeting location. "It meant I saw you reading by your apartment window." Her pulse quickened. "The lost daughter hears what others cannot." You had identified a coded Sicilian phrase 3 senior translators missed. "Home waits beneath the bells. The estate chapel has 4 bells." Claire stared at him. "Every investigation was a conversation. Only from my side. You knew I was listening. I hoped you were. That is incredibly arrogant." "Yes. And disturbing." "Yes. And—" She stopped. Luca waited. "And what?" he asked. Claire looked away. "Nothing." A faint warmth entered his eyes. It was the closest she had seen him come to smiling. The moment ended when the mansion's security alarms activated. Vehicles approached through the snow. Not federal cars. Armored trucks. Hale had found them. Luca ordered Claire into the vault. She refused. "The evidence requires my biometric authorization. If you lock me inside and die outside, no one gets it. You are not fighting. I know how to use a firearm. That is not the same as surviving a siege, and being a mafia boss does not make you immortal." His eyes hardened. "Claire, you promised to stop deciding for me." The words stopped him. Gunfire shattered the mansion's front windows. Luca gave her a pistol. "Stay behind me." "That sounds like a compromise designed entirely by you." "It is the only compromise available." Hale's mercenaries entered through the east wing. The mansion became a battlefield of broken marble, gunsmoke, and falling snow. Claire remained with Luca as they moved through the library. She translated intercepted radio commands in real time, identifying flank movements and false retreats. "They are driving us toward the chapel," she said. Hale wants the servers beneath it. He also knows the chapel connects to the cliff tunnels. Luca looked at her. How do you know? I remember. They reached the abandoned chapel as stained glass exploded inward. Luca pushed Claire beneath the altar. He returned fire, moving with lethal calm. A mercenary appeared in the balcony. Claire saw him before Luca did. She fired. The shot struck the railing beside him, forcing him back. Luca looked at her. I missed, she said. You saved my life. Then stop looking surprised. Smoke filled the chapel. Hale's voice came through the speakers. Chiara Moretti, your father destroyed everyone he loved for evidence no one was meant to see. Do not repeat his mistake. Claire found the control panel beside the altar and activated the estate's internal system. Hale, she said into the microphone, my father died protecting the truth, and your mother died because he chose it over her. The words struck deep. Luca watched Claire carefully. Hale continued. Ask DeLuca how many people he has sacrificed for power. Ask him whether he would destroy his empire for you. Claire looked at Luca. He stood in the ruined chapel with blood on his collar and a gun in his hand. Every inch the man the world feared. Would you? She asked. His answer came without hesitation. Yes. The chapel doors opened. Hale entered holding Daniel at gunpoint. Daniel's face was bruised, his hands bound. Claire stepped forward. Luca caught her wrist. Hale smiled. There it is. The final weakness of powerful men. They always believe devotion makes them noble. You would not understand devotion, Luca said. No, but I understand leverage. Hale pressed the weapon against Daniel's head. Transfer the archive to my drive, Claire, or Agent Cross dies. Daniel shook his head. Don't. Claire looked at the drive Hale tossed across the floor, then at the control screen. She moved toward it. Luca's hand tightened around her wrist. If you give him the evidence, he kills everyone. I know. Hale shouted. Now. Claire inserted the drive. Data began transferring. Hale's attention fixed on the screen. Daniel moved. He drove his shoulder backward into Hale's chest. The gun fired. Daniel fell. Claire screamed. Luca shot Hale's weapon from his hand. The chapel erupted. Mercenaries fired from the balconies. Luca pulled Claire behind a pillar as bullets tore through the altar. Daniel lay motionless near the doors. Claire tried to reach him. Luca held her back. We cannot get to him. He's bleeding. If you move, you die. Let me go. No. She fought him. A bullet struck the pillar inches from her head. Luca turned, covering her completely. Another bullet hit him. His body jerked. Claire felt warm blood spread between them. Luca. He remained standing. His face had gone pale. He raised his weapon and fired until the balcony fell silent. Marco and DeLuca reinforcements entered through the tunnels, surrounding Hale's remaining men. Hale crawled toward his gun. Claire saw him. She lifted her pistol. Hale froze. For years he had shaped her career, hidden her name, murdered her family, and treated her like a key rather than a person. Claire! Daniel rasped from the floor. He was alive. Hale looked at her with contempt. You do not have the courage. Claire's hand steadied. No, she said. I have evidence. She lowered the gun. Daniel activated a recording device hidden beneath his shirt. Every word Hale had spoken had been transmitted to agents Daniel trusted outside the corrupted task force. Sirens rose beyond the estate. This time, they were real. Hale looked toward the chapel doors. His empire was ending. Luca collapsed. Claire caught him before he struck the floor. Blood covered his chest. She pressed her hands over the wound. Stay with me. His eyes opened with effort. Is the evidence safe? I don't care about the evidence. You should. I care about you. The words escaped before she could stop them. Something softened in his face. Outside, red and blue lights moved across the snow. Luca lifted a blood-stained hand and touched the moon pendant at her throat. "You came home," he whispered. Claire leaned over him, tears falling freely now. "No, you brought me here. There is a difference." His breathing weakened. "Then choose to stay." It was not a command. It was the first thing Luca had ever asked of her. Claire pressed her forehead against his. "Live long enough to ask me again." Luca underwent emergency surgery at a secure hospital under federal protection for 12 hours. Claire waited outside the operating room, wearing his blood on her clothes. Daniel sat beside her with his shoulder bandaged. Federal agents moved through the corridors. Hale had been arrested. Warrants were issued across 4 states. Judges, contractors, agents, and former prosecutors were taken into custody before sunrise. The evidence from the Moretti vault had begun dismantling the network that shaped Claire's entire life. None of it mattered while the operating room light remained red. At dawn, the surgeon emerged. He survived. Claire closed her eyes. The relief was so powerful it felt like pain. She found Luca in intensive care, pale beneath white sheets, surrounded by machines. The most feared Mafia Boss in Chicago looked almost ordinary while sleeping. She sat beside him. Hours later, his eyes opened. He saw her and tried to move. "Don't," Claire said. His voice was rough. "Hale? Alive. Arrested. Furious. Daniel? Alive. Also furious. The evidence? Released to 3 newspapers, the Inspector General, and an international anti-corruption commission." Luca studied her. "You released it?" "Yes. You destroyed several federal careers. I have had a stressful week." A faint breath of amusement left him. Claire took his hand. His fingers closed weakly around hers. "What happens to your organization?" she asked. "The legitimate companies remain. The rest ends. You're dismantling it. I told Hale I would destroy my empire for you. You said it during a gunfight. People exaggerate. I do not." She looked at him carefully. "You cannot erase everything you have done. I know. You may still face charges. I know. I will not build a life around waiting for violence to find us. It will not. You cannot promise that." "No," he said. "But I can remove every part of my life that invites it." Claire felt emotion tighten her throat. "Why?" His gaze remained steady. "Because dependence became fear. Fear became obsession. And obsession became something I can no longer survive by watching from a distance." She said nothing. Luca lifted her hand to his chest, over the bandages and the beat of his heart. "I love you." The words were quiet. No performance. No ownership. Only truth from a man who had nearly died before learning how to offer it without control. Claire's eyes burned. "You watched me for 6 years." "Yes." "You manipulated recordings." "Yes." "You used me as bait." His face tightened. "Yes. You are impossible. I have been told." She leaned closer. "I'm still angry." "You should be. I don't know whether forgiveness will be simple. I do not expect simple." Claire touched his face. For once, he did not move toward her. He waited. The restraint mattered. She kissed him. It was not gentle, because neither of them had reached this moment gently. His hand rose to the back of her neck, then stopped, giving her the choice to close the distance. She did. The kiss deepened slowly, carrying grief, anger, fear, and the dangerous tenderness they had denied through every gunshot and secret. When Claire drew back, Luca's breathing had changed. "You should not do that while I am medically restricted," he murmured. "You survived 3 bullets. You can survive 1 kiss. I am less certain." 6 months later, Warren Hale was convicted in federal court. Daniel testified against him. Claire did too. She walked into the courtroom under her birth name and left under the name she chose for herself, Claire Chiara Evans Moretti. Not because a document had defined her, because all of those names belonged to women she had been. The daughter who was hidden, the child who was loved, the translator who heard what others missed, The woman who refused to let powerful men decide which truths she could survive. Luca pleaded guilty to financial crimes connected to several of his former companies. In exchange for full cooperation, the dismantling of his criminal network, and evidence against Hale's partners, he received a reduced sentence of 18 months. Claire visited him every week. He never asked her to wait. She did anyway. When Luca was released, Chicago was covered in snow. Claire stood outside the federal facility in a dark green coat, the moon pendant visible at her throat. The gates opened. Luca walked toward her carrying nothing. No guards, no convoy, no tailored suit, just a dark coat, a healing scar, and the same controlled eyes that had once looked through a hidden camera and changed her life. He stopped several feet away. For the first time since they met, uncertainty crossed his face. Claire folded her arms. "You're late. I was incarcerated." That sounds like an excuse. His mouth almost curved. Behind Claire waited a single black SUV. Luca looked at it, then at her. "Where are we going?" "The Moretti estate." His expression became guarded. "I thought you sold it." "I sold the Chicago properties. I kept the house." "Why?" Claire stepped closer. "We turned the East Wing into a language and legal advocacy center for families leaving witness protection. Daniel is helping oversee the security program." Luca stared at her. "The house will belong to them?" "To anyone who needs a safe place to become themselves again." Wind moved snow between them. Claire saw the emotion he could not hide quickly enough. "And the nursery?" he asked. "I restored it." His eyes lifted to hers. "For what purpose?" She took his hand and placed it over her coat against the subtle curve beneath it. Luca stopped breathing. For once, the man feared by entire cities had no words. Claire watched realization transform his face. The control vanished. His knees nearly gave. He lowered himself in front of her, one hand still resting carefully over the new life between them. "Claire." She touched his hair. Yes. His eyes closed. When he looked up again, they were bright with something raw and reverent. "How long?" 4 months. "You visited me every week and said nothing. You once hid my identity for 30 years. Consider us unevenly matched." He stood and cupped her face. His hands trembled. Claire had never seen Luca DeLuca tremble. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "Yes." "Good." He frowned. "It means you understand that you cannot control everything. I never wanted to control this. What do you want?" His forehead rested against hers. "To be worthy of coming home." Claire kissed him beneath the falling snow. 1 year later, the Moretti estate glowed with warm light above Lake Michigan. The restored chapel bells rang across the cliffs. The mansion no longer belonged to silence, secrets, or dead men's promises. Children ran through the halls. Families met with lawyers in the former library. Translators worked in rooms where criminal ledgers had once been hidden. Claire stood in the nursery beside an open window. Their daughter slept in her arms, wrapped in a blanket patterned with silver moons. Luca entered quietly. He had learned to move without bringing danger into every room. He stood behind Claire and looked down at the child. "She has your eyes," he said. "She is 3 months old. Her eyes may change." "They will not. You cannot intimidate genetics." "I can attempt negotiation." Claire smiled. Luca wrapped one arm around her waist. He had become gentler, but never harmless. The world still recognized the danger in him. Men still lowered their voices when he entered a room. Yet with Claire, his power no longer took the shape of control. It became presence. Patience. The choice to stay. Their daughter stirred. Luca reached for her but hesitated. Claire noticed. "You can hold her. She is asleep. She will survive." "That is not my concern." "What is?" His gaze moved over the tiny face. "That I will wake her." Claire placed the baby in his arms. Luca held their daughter as though she was something both sacred and impossible. The chapel bells rang again. Claire looked toward the lake, where moonlight spread across the dark water. Years earlier, Luca had looked through a hidden camera and told her to come home. At the time, she believed home was a place he had chosen for her. Now she understood. Home was never the mansion. It was not the name buried in federal records. It was not the inheritance, the evidence, or the promise made by frightened boys and dying fathers. Home was the place where the truth could no longer be used to imprison her. The place where love did not require obedience. The place where a dangerous man learned that devotion meant opening his hands instead of closing them. Luca looked at Claire over their daughter's sleeping face. "Come here," he murmured. Claire stepped into his embrace. Outside, snow began to fall over the lake. Inside, beneath the silver light of the moon, the Mafia Boss who had once called her home finally understood that she had not returned because he summoned her. She had returned because he had become someone she could choose. And this time, when Luca whispered her name, there were no hidden cameras, no coded messages, and no enemies listening in the darkness. Only Claire, only their daughter, only the quiet heartbeat of a new life built from everything they had survived. And for the first time in his life, Luca DeLuca was no longer waiting for someone to come home. He was already there.